Hello and welcome to my presentation of assessing the potential impacts of tidal and wind energy development on marine mammals and seabirds in the Gulf of Maine. My name is Tanya Cochran and I will be your host. Good morning, everyone. We are the Fins and Feathers Research Unit, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the study and conservation of marine vertebrates. We understand that Blue Power Renewables is considering tidal and wind energy projects in the Gulf of Maine. In this presentation, we will introduce the key marine mammal and seabird species found in the area, discuss their behavioral ecology, and assess the potential impacts of these projects on these species. We will also highlight current conservation efforts and research needs. Our goal is to provide you with the information necessary to make informed decisions about these projects and to minimize their impacts on the marine environment. Thank you for this opportunity, and we look forward to working with you. According to Evans, 2008, harbor seals are resident species found throughout the year in Maine's coastal habitats like bays and islands. In contrast, Atlantic white-sided dolphins occupy the offshore waters of the Gulf of Maine. Both species are carnivores, feeding on various fish and invertebrate prey. However, harbor seals tend to forage in nearshore environments, while dolphins hunt in open pelagic waters. International Fund for Animal Welfare of 2024 was associated with that. Socially, harbor seals are mostly solitary animals, whereas Atlantic white-sided dolphins form groups and display social behaviors. Evans 2008 notes that harbor porpoises and fin whales are migratory species. Harbor porpoises use Maine's coastal bays and inshore waters seasonally, while fin whales occupy deeper offshore regions and continental shelf edges in the Gulf of Maine. The two species have similar diets, consuming various fish and invertebrate prey. However, harbor porpoises tend to be solitary, whereas fin whales may form larger social groups, especially during feeding. Fin whales are also known for their fast swimming speeds and long-distance migrations. Beluga whales, though typically Arctic species, occasionally visit Maine waters. These have a diverse diet of fish and invertebrates, which they hunt using echolocation. Belugas are highly social animals, living in complex groups with stronger familiar bonds. They are known for their extensive vocalizations used for both foraging and socializing. Beluga movements and distributions are heavily influenced by seasonal ice coverage in the Arctic habitat. Atlantic puffins, common terns, and Leach's storm petrels are breeds on Maine's coastal islands. Puffins and terns foraged relatively close to their nesting colonies, while storm petrels are more pelagic, feeding far offshore. Puffins and terns primarily catch small fish, whereas storm petrels feed on surface plankton. All three species are colonial nesters, forming dense breeding aggregations on islands. Their migration range from coastal movements to transatlantic journeys. Double-crested cormorants breed on the Maine coast, while great shearwaters are pelagic visitors. Cormorants forage in coastal waters, diving to catch fish, whereas shearwaters feed offshore. Great shearwaters breed in South Atlantic but migrate to the Gulf of Maine during the non-breeding seasons. Cormorants are colonial nesters, forming breeding aggregations on coastal islands and shorelines. Though ecologically distant, both species rely on the Gulf of Maine's productive waters for foraging. The installation of tidal turbines could distribute important nearshore foraging habitats for harbor seals. Increased vessel traffic associated with construction and maintenance may alleviate disturbance and collision risk for both seals and dolphins. Underwater noise from turbine operation could mask vocalizations used by these species for communication and foraging. According to Evans, Atlantic white-sided dolphins may be vulnerable to entanglement in moorings and cables. Changes in local oceanography due to the presence of turbines may alter prey distribution for both species. Tidal turbine placement in coastal areas could impede seasonal movements and migrations of harbor porpoises. Underwater noise from the turbines may interfere with porpoise echolocation, a critical sense for foraging and navigation. Ship strikes are a primary threat to fin whales, and this risk could increase with elevated vessel traffic. Both species are vulnerable to entanglement in cables and moorings associated with the turbines. As with other marine mammals, changes in local oceanography due to the turbine's presence may shift prey distribution. Though rare in marine waters, beluga whales could face collision risk if they enter coastal areas with tidal turbines. Noise generated by these turbines may disrupt beluga echolocation and their extensive vocalizations used for social communications. Entanglement in cables and moorings is another potential hazard for these whales. If vagrant individuals use the Gulf of Maine as a migratory corridor, turbine placement could impact those movements. Indirect effects on beluga prey availability are also possible due to the changes in local oceanography. Wind turbines constructed near seabird nesting islands could increase collision risk, particularly for Atlantic puffins and common terns that forage closer to colonies. Turbine placement might impact important foraging areas for these species. The foundations of the turbines may alter local prey distribution by acting as artificial reefs. Lighting up the turbines could disorient nocturnal leeches, storm petrels, potentially leading to standings. These impacts must be considered cumulatively with other stressors like climate change and overfishing. Both double-crested cormorants and great shearwaters could be at risk of collision with wind turbines, particularly during conditions of poor visibility. Foraging areas for these diving birds might be distributed by turbine placement. The foundations of the turbines could alter local prey aggregations by serving as artificial reefs. Underwater noise generated by the turbines might impact the foraging efficiency of these visual predators. Great shearwaters may be vulnerable to disorientation by the turbine lighting during their migration through the Gulf of Maine. Both harbor seals and Atlantic white-sided dolphins are protected in U.S. waters under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, or MMPA. NOAA conducts aerial surveys to monitor harbor seals population trends and distribution in Maine waters. They are also committed to researching on and protecting Atlantic white-sided dolphins. Researchers use small aircraft to locate these Pacific white-sided dolphins, which are then photographed in attempts to identify individual ones and record their distribution. It is important to know that information on the distribution help managers to establish various means that can minimize the possible contact of the fishery and dolphins. Thus, this research helped management actions to provide protection for the Pacific white-sided dolphin species. However, data on Atlantic white-sided dolphin populations and ecology in the Gulf of Maine are limited. Key research needs for these specific species include assessing the impact of fisheries interactions and better understanding their habitat use patterns. Conservation efforts should focus on mitigation, human disturbance, and maintaining prey population. Like other marine mammals, harbor porpoises and fin whales are protected under the MMPA. Fin whales are also listed as endangered under the Endangered Species Act, or ESA. Bycatch gillnet fisheries is a major conservation concern for harbor porpoises. Fin whales are particularly vulnerable to ship strikes and entanglement in fishing gear. Ongoing research efforts focus on understanding habitat use patterns and monitoring population trends for these species. Conservation measures include fishing gear modifications, ship speed reduction, and maintaining prey population. Beluga whales are protected under the MMPA, and some populations are listed as endangered under the ESA. Major conservation threats include climate change impacts on Arctic sea ice, subsistence hunting, and pollution. Acoustic monitoring techniques are used to detect beluga presence in some areas. Current research efforts focus on understanding beluga habitat use, population structure, and the effects of contaminants. Conservation measures include reducing human disturbance, mitigating climate change impacts, and international cooperation on management. Atlantic puffins, common terns, and leeches, storm petrels are protected under the Mitigation Bird Treaty Act. Many of these nesting islands in Maine are managed as national wildlife refuges or state-owned preserves. Restoration efforts, including translocations and gull control, have led to population recoveries for puffins and terns. However, Leach's storm petrels are declining, likely due to climate change and predation. Current research involves colony monitoring, tracking studies, and habitat management. Conservation focuses on protecting nesting sites and reducing threats. Researchers have used different methods to study these seabirds, including the use of GPS, decoys, and sound recordings, and satellite. For instance, researchers have taken young birds from Newfoundland to Maine, put out decoy puffins to attract birds, and even record the sounds. They have even studied the movement pattern over the winter of one species, the Atlantic puffin. Double-crested cormorants are protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. Great shearwaters are also protected under that act and the Agreement on the Conservation of Albatrosses and Petrels, also known as the ACAP. Cormorants populations recovered after the DTT ban, but are now managed in some areas due to their impact on fisheries. Shearwaters are vulnerable to fishery bycatch and plastic ingestion. Colony surveys and at-sea surveys are used to monitor populations of both species. Priority research needs include foraging ecology, fishery interactions, and contaminant studies. In conclusion, the Gulf of Maine is home to a diverse array of marine mammals and seabirds, many of which are protected under federal and international laws. While tidal and wind energy projects have the potential to contribute to renewable energy goals, they also pose risks to these species. Careful planning, monitoring, and mitigation measures will be essential to minimize negative impacts. Collaboration between energy companies, researchers, and conservation organizations will be critical to ensuring that these projects are developed in a sustainable manner. At FFRU, we are committed to providing the scientific guidance and support necessary to achieve this balance. We look forward to working closely with Blue Power Renewables to ensure that your projects in the Gulf of Maine are a model for responsible and sustainable energy development. Thank you for your attention, and we welcome any questions you may have.